Welcome to our first lesson in our percent unit. This one is on percent of a number, something we covered in 6th grade, and we're going to review quickly. Get your title, learning target. I can use proportional relationships to solve percent problems. So to find percent of a number, some of you might remember the trick. It simply means to multiply the number times your percent. The word of is really code for multiply. So when you see a problem something like this, 5% of 300, it's really code for 5% times 300. That's it. You're just multiplying those two together. The trick is, how do we multiply them together? And we've got two options. So get this jotted down in your notes. One is we can change the percent into a fraction, meaning write it over 100, because percent means out of 100. Or we can change it to a decimal. And if you remember, moving from a percent, so something like 92%, to change it into a decimal, we just slide the decimal place over 2 spots. It runs away from the percent sign to become 0.92. So let's try one of each of those. So 40% of 70. So 40% times 70. Let's write this one over 100. So 40% becomes 40 over 100. Times 70, which is really 70 over 1. When you multiply fractions, look to see if you can cross-simplify anything. So 100 and 70 could each be divided by 10. So I could get a 10 and a 7. My 10 and 40 could even be divided by 10 again. So I get a 1 and a 4. And then when I'm done, multiply numerators, multiply denominators. 4 times 7 is 28 over 1, or 28. The other option is to change your percent into a decimal. So we just take our decimal. If it's a whole number, the decimal is always on the right-hand side. We move it 2 spots to the left. So we get 0.15 times 280. You can go ahead and do your actual multiplication problem if you want to, but when we're dealing with decimals, a lot of times it's just easier just to type it into our handy-dandy calculator. And we would get 42 as an answer. So if the percent is going to play nicely as a fraction and you can do it quickly, go for it. But when in doubt, it's easy just to turn it into a decimal, but that word of, again, is just code for multiply. So if you think you know what you're doing, try these two on your own. If not, follow along, and I'm going to work through them on my own. So this one, we're going to write it over 100. We're going to write it as a fraction. So 35% means 35 out of 100. Of means multiply, so times 75. Here I'm going to look to see if I can cross-simplify anything. In this case, 175 could each be divided by 25. So I get 4 and a 3. Here, there's nothing that a 4 and 35 could both be divided by, so I just got to go ahead and multiply. 35 times 3 is 105. 4 times 1 is 4. And now I got to figure out, all right, how many times can 4 go into 105? Well, if you think about it, 4 goes into 105 25 times, and then I could squeeze in one more, so I'd give it 26, and I'd have 1 left over, so 26 and 1/4, or, as you're going to see a lot with our decimals, or percents, we're going to get decimals a lot of times, so we could write it as 26.25. All right, next one. Move the decimal 2 spots to the left. We want to find 130% of 60, so 130% times 60. In this case, I just want to move my decimal over 2 spots to make it into a decimal. So I can make it into 1.3 times 60. Go ahead, type it into my calculator. 1.3 times 60 gives me an answer of 78. So more often than not, you're probably going to use this second method, and that's okay. But just be comfortable using both of those methods. So a couple word problems. So they're not always going to be nice and easy like percent of a number. We're going to have to kind of piece it together. So write this down, not just the word. Mackenzie wants to buy a backpack that costs $50. If the tax rate is 6.5%, how much tax will she pay? Well, we want to find 6.5% of our cost, which was $50. Well, every time your brain says, let's find a percent of my number, that's really just saying multiply your percent times your number. Since this one's already got a decimal in it, let's leave it in decimal form, but we just move it over 2 spots to turn it into a decimal. So we want 0.065, same thing as 6.5% times 50. So my calculator, I type in, and I get an answer of 3.25. Makes sense. 6.5% is a small amount. Think of sales tax or something like that. So it doesn't make sense to pay about $3 in tax on $50 purchase. Last one. Suppose there are 20 questions on a multiple choice test. If 30% of the answers are choice B, how many of the answers are not choice B? So this one requires a little bit of careful reading. I tried to trick you here, but then, I'm pointing it out for you so I don't trick you. 30% is choice B, so how much is not choice B? Well, if 30% is, that means 70% is not. And we want 70% of 20 questions. Well, of means to multiply. So 70% is really 0.7 times 20. In my handy dandy calculator, I get an answer of 14 questions. So 14 out of the 20 questions would be not choice B.